you. In his doctoral dissertation, which was submitted and approved in Falkirk University in 1934 under the Nazi regime, historian Yaakov Katz asserted that the integration of the Jews in German society during the emancipation era was in fact integration in the German bourgeois middle class and becoming a subgroup within it. Katz, who immigrated to Palestine in 1936, became one of the most prominent historians of European modern European Jewry, and served between the years 1981 and 1992 as the chair of the Jerusalem Baeck Institute, related to the going up of the Jews in the Bildungs- and Besitzleder as an expression to this process of integration. More recent scholars like Zohar Shavit, Simon Lessig, and of course Miron Kaplan, to name only a few, treated more specifically in this context to the daily life of the Jews and to their habitus as an expression to this process. Jews spoke, were dressed, worked, educated their children, and also lived in homes according to the habitus of the German middle class. Habitus that they did not only accept passively, but took part during the 19th century in its creation, as Steve Asheim showed. As this process of emancipation went forward, they also chose more and more to live in neighborhoods of upper German middle class, as Stephen Lewishton showed in his analysis of the residential patterns of German Jews, a process which was mostly prominent in Berlin and Frankfurt. The concept and the experience of home is a key element in the lived space of modern era. Home, as it is stated in the International Encyclopedia of Human Geography, is a highly fluid and contested site of human existence that reflects and reifies identities and values. It can be seen as a private space, a family unit, and a reservoir of material objects, as well as a cognitive, emotional things and memories. The European bourgeois home experience developed with the actual layout of houses and apartments, their furniture, their interior decoration, and the related elements. A major character of these homes from the mid-19th century onward, which was typical also to German Jewish homes, was the growing of the internal division on functions within the domestic space. Bourgeois homes were divided into public and more private spaces. The drawing room was clearly separated from the kitchen, separate spaces for children and adults emerged, and the gender roles of men and women became more distinct. The sense of comfort and belonging that bourgeois home offered were expressed in the German culture by the famous concept of Gemütlichkeit. Home, Heim, and apartment, Wohnung, stated the German architect Willy Frank in 1920, can be seen as an expression of the soul of their inhabitants. Based on these insights, scholars have discussed the close connection between the experience of home and the development of the self. Accordingly, historians of German Jewry turned in the last decades to locate sources in order to reconstruct the domestic life of German Jews as part of their studying of their daily life, as well as a base to understand their social identity and the development of their self. Miron Kaplan based mostly on memoirs and ego documents in order to analyze the Jewish bourgeois domesticity in the period of the Kaiserreich in a classical book, The Making of Jewish Middle Class, which was, by the way, translated to Hebrew in Ksharim, the Leo Baeck Institute book series. Leora Auslander used in several other articles interior photographs of Jewish homes in Germany in order to analyze their design and the habitus that they embodied. From a different perspective, the young Israeli historian Maya Shabbat has recently examined the domestic patterns of Eastern European Jewish immigrants in Charlottenburg, drawing also on municipal records. The social and economic exclusion of German Jews under the Nazi regime, starting in 1933, forced many German Jews to leave their houses and apartments and move to less expensive, in most cases, smaller places. With time, the escalating circumstances led many to move to rented furnished homes within homes of other Jewish families, sometimes temporary housing solutions before immigration. Others had to rent out rooms in their homes to strangers. These developments, which naturally severely challenged the experience of and habitus of home, escalated from 1939 onward as the law concerning the tenant relations with Jews sanctioned the confinement of Jews into Judenhäusers, Jewish homes. My talk today will deal with the struggle of German Jews to preserve their domestic habitus under these harsh circumstances. In summer 1934, the Berlin Jewish doctor Herta Natuf and her husband decided, as the consequences of the economic situation, to downsize their living space, the living space they occupied, in the rented apartment, and to use the remaining rooms for multiple purposes. Quote, "The maid will marry soon, which means she won't need the room anymore. I will keep only one receptionist, and one of the consulting offices I can use for our bedroom. The apartment located in the back will now be used by the landlord. I feel how step by step I am buried in this apartment," unquote. At approximately the same time, the Hamburg lawyer Kurt Rosenberg, whose business was shrinking, had to unite his office and his apartment into one space. Rosenberg described this despairing move as going in reverse and associated it with a severe experience of inner emptiness. Both Natuf's experience of being buried and Rosenberg's report about inner emptiness express a crisis in their spatial identity. This crisis did not originate only from the very diminishing of their domestic space. It also was an outcome of the growing overlapping of various private spaces. The mixed use of home and office, an inevitable outcome of the shrinking personal space, can be seen as a symbolic abandonment of the bourgeois domestic habitus of separation between the spheres. The Jewish public discourse concerning home and household in Nazi Germany, which touched upon this challenge, was directed mostly to women, as they, and again I quote Marion Kaplan, were supposed to make things work in the family and household, unquote. In a May 1934 article, Berlin Jewish journalist and former kindergarten teacher Meta Samson discussed the changes which accompanied moving from a large apartment in a considerably smaller furnished room. These changes go, Samson asserted, far beyond the external alteration and limitations and have a much deeper impact on the many bourgeois Jewish families' life. Quote, "Giving up possession, which comes with this, breaks the mindset and the way of feeling, Gedanken and Gefühlsgut, and together with the actual core around which the shell of outer life is wrapped," unquote. The downsizing of the apartment, Samson asserted, the Jewish housewife experiences not only the loss of social prestige and rank, but also an outer void. Samson's analysis of the emotional impact of moving to smaller apartments or small furnished rooms on the German Jewish women clearly corresponds with the sociologist Mark Fried's famous thesis concerning grieving a lost home. And again, a citation of Samson. "The possession has lost its meaning. The silver cutlery on the table, the damask clothes have become superfluous. The tasty food, the neat servant belong now to a bygone era," unquote. Criticizing Jewish housewives who did not adapt to the new situation, Samson calls her readers to relinquish everything that takes too much space. Still, her plea to accommodate to the dismantling of pre-1933 Jewish bourgeois habitus does not mean giving up on the very idea of home and the key role of the Jewish housewife in it. And again I quote, "In her heart and mind, the Jewish housewife has now to find a new way to be at home, zu Hause, which will hold the family together, not by the spaces and comfort, but by a shared purpose of life," unquote. Samson's article clearly demonstrates an attempt to transform the meaning of home and adapt it to the new situation. Home and at home, zu Hause, refer now primarily to the emotional space and point more to the belonging than to the comfort. In the late 1930s, as anti-Jewish measures and the economic situation continued to escalate, the Breslau historian and teacher Willy Kohn had to cope with the growing threat of further downsizing his private home sphere. Not only that he had to rent out one of his apartment's rooms to strangers, his family's actual domestic space became even smaller during the winters, as they could not afford enough coal to heat all the rooms. Key elements of domestic comfort which made the Kohns feel at home in the sense of emotional space were now significantly reduced. Historians and social scientists present certain behaviors that people tend to adapt when they feel uncomfortable with their close environment. When facing discrepancies between their special habitus and their immediate physical settings, individuals often try to personalize the space or adapt it to it in the best possible way, using a variety of what Michel de Certeau called tactics in their daily practices. Being oneself at home has to do with what one does at home. Thus, following the November 1938 pogroms and its repercussions, Willy Kohn focused more efforts in organizing his home library. This domestic activity, as well as his renewed devotion to stamp collection and his dedication to writing articles for the Jewish press, can be seen as various tactics to preserve remnants of his bourgeois habitus under the forced isolation. For the Dresden diarist and former literature professor Victor Klemperer, home became in the late 1930s a space of action and creation. Following his December 1938 ban from the Public University Library, Klemperer decided to dedicate himself to writing and analyzing his own life story, which he refers to in his diary as a curriculum, the one project he could work on without public library. In time, he developed the ability to work at home, and later on, from May 1940, in even more severe conditions in the Judenhaus. Even after the Gestapo searchers forced him to stop writing the curriculum in 1942, Klemperer did not relinquish his struggle for a domestic space of creation. His isolated life in the Judenhaus, he wrote in June 1942, still enabled him to have a little bit of something he could do for himself, express his selfhood. Quote, "I'm downright happy for many hours of the day," he noted in late 1942 diary entry that he thought might be the last one to write before he will be taken. "I study, I prepare future work. In years to come, I do not need to have any more creative ideas, only the opportunity to work out in detail what I have planned and sketched now," unquote. In summer 1939, Berlin widow Cathy Moses moved to a single rented room with other Jewish flatmates. In a letter to her son Gerd, who lived in Palestine, she referred to her decision to preserve the Gemütlichkeit in this very small space in spite of the uncertainty and radically escalating situation. Quote, "Sometimes one thinks, why build something up again and then again? How long is it going to take until emigration is a reasonable sight? In this situation, one nonetheless does not want to give up coziness, Gemütlichkeit. Examples for lack of coziness, Ungemütlichkeit, are heard often enough. Hence, I decorated my room nicely, as small as it is," unquote. Living in a room that covered not even 13 square meters, Moses not only filled it with numerous pieces of furniture, but decorated it carefully, including hanging curtains and putting up her library, porcelain figures and plates. She even made an effort to repair furniture which has suffered from the move. These domestic symbols of bourgeois prosperity, reminders of better time, helped her to produce the atmosphere of Gemütlichkeit, turning the small room into a home. Furthermore, Moses even tried to preserve the internal divisions in her room. The little space, as she described it, was subdivided into a study, a bedroom where she slept, a dining room where she took her meals, and a salon where she received guests and a storeroom. Moses' life took a place primarily at home, and she was not eager at all to go out too much. She took pride in her place and reported about visitors who brought her flowers, another opportunity to make her home prettier. Refusing consciously to accept the situation of living in an empty waiting time, Moses designed her small living space as gemütlich as possible, loading it with past memories and open future expectations. Moses' decision to create home for herself against all odds can therefore be presented as an act of defiance. Getting closer to sum up. In his essay, Building Dwelling Thinking, Martin Heidegger expanded the meaning of the word wohnen, dwelling, or lodging. Presenting the ancient German word bauen, Heidegger argued that dwelling was not simply an activity that human beings carried out. It meant something much more profound about human existence. And I quote, "The way in which you are and I am, the manner in which we humans are on earth is bauen, dwelling," he wrote. Heidegger's essay, based on a lecture he gave in 1951, gave a voice to the longing for home that many Germans felt after the war. But on a deeper level, it invokes the need of domesticity and practices that constitute it, those that can define human existence at large. This idea seems to take hold in particular moments of crisis, which require thinking about one's perception of oneself, the past and the future. In this sense, the intensity and to extent to which Jews grappled with this question under the Nazi regime reveals just how profound and existential crisis they were undergoing. The search for German Jews for Heim was, of course, connected to the relationship with their homeland, Heimat. This quest continued also among those of them who managed to save themselves and leave Germany as immigrants, refugees, exiles, or olim, you name it. In conclusion, I would like to mention the Leo Baeck Institute's project of German diaspora, German Jewish diaspora, that I have the honor to be participating in. We are an international group of historians working on different aspects of the diverse lives of German Jews in the diaspora worldwide, and the theme of home, as well as homeland, is of course very prominent in our project. The German Jewish memory materials all over the diaspora, which I'm studying in this project, present a wide variety of engagement to the idea of home. One finds discussions on the family home in diaries and memoirs, and in rich family photo albums that migrants took with them. Sometimes special albums of farewell from their home in Germany, as demonstrated recently by Ofer Ashkenazi and Shira Miron. Home also appears in the rich material culture, a wide array of objects immigrants brought with them from their homes in the old homeland, sometimes through a long migration journey through various countries of refuge. The motif of home also recurs in homeland visits by German Jews in Germany beginning in 1960s. And of course, above all, one can discern the efforts of migrants and of the generation after them to build themselves a new home in the country they chose as their homeland, with foundations of continuity, but also with many changes from the culture of origin from which they came.